everyone out who's made it. Hopefully we all are able to make it home safely as well, being that it's raining. But let's sing Where He Leads I'll Follow, song number 498. Where He Leads I'll Follow. Sweet are the promises, kind is the word, dearer far than any message man ever heard. Pure was the mind of Christ, sinless I see. He the great example is and pattern for me. Where He leads I'll follow, follow all the way. Where He leads I'll follow, follow Jesus every day. Sweet is the tender love Jesus has shown, sweeter far than any love that mortals have known. Kind to the erring one, faithful is He. He the great example is and pattern for me. Where He leads I'll follow, follow all the way. Where He leads I'll follow, follow Jesus every day. Listen to His loving words, come unto me. Weary, heavy laden, there is sweet rest for thee. Trust in His promises, faithful and sure. Lean upon the Savior, and thy soul is secure. Where He leads I'll follow, follow all the way. Where He leads I'll follow, follow Jesus every day.
Let's go to God in prayer. Heavenly Father, we humbly approach your throne at this time, thankful for this church, thankful for this family, for a place where we can meet. We're thankful for the freedom that we enjoy in this country to praise you openly. We pray, Lord, that we would never lose the boldness that we have in serving you, regardless of circumstance. We pray, Lord, that as we open up your word, that we would be mindful of your truth, that we would look for application always in our lives. We pray that we would be encouraged, we would be edified, we'd be strengthened. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Well, good evening. For those of you that made it, it does look like we have a light crowd tonight. The rain kept people in. So we're going to continue our study in Mark chapter 8. Last time we went a little past verse 14, but I wanted to back up and read that section again. We have to remember that Mark verse 1 and 2 of Mark state that this is Mark's account declaring the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, as was written by Isaiah the prophet. And so there's so many of those Isaiah prophecies that come out in Mark. And tonight I think we're going to see a really cool development of one of the main things and that Isaiah had said about Israel, Isaiah chapter 6, other places in Isaiah as well, that they've become dull and their heart is far from him. But the idea of them being dull and they're blind and they've closed their ears so they don't hear. That thought keep that in mind as we move forward through this text. And then we get to see the way Mark lays this out. And it's very interesting, I think, in the next several verses, how that ties together. So I'll just say that, and then let's go ahead. A little background. Jesus had just fed the 4,000 with 5 loaves of bread and a few fish. And then the Pharisees came and asked him to show them a sign from heaven, something more than the miracles he'd been doing, something greater, something like Elijah would have done. Or even, we talked about the fact that if they'd only been there at his baptism and see the heavens torn open and God speaking from heaven, that would have been a sign from them, or from heaven, that they would have been able to see. But he says this generation will not get a sign given to it. And he speaks to that, why does this generation seek a sign? One of the things we talked about is this generation being the nation as a whole, especially these leaders, but this nation as a whole is dull. They're not seeing Jesus for who he is, what he came to do, and they don't even understand the concept of the kingdom. Of course, we see the apostles having the same struggle with that as well. His own disciples, those that are with him, are struggling to see all of that. So, verse 14 in chapter 8. Now, when they had forgotten to bring bread, they had only one, and they had only one loaf with them in the boat. He cautioned them, saying, "Watch out, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod." And they began discussing with one another the fact that they had no bread. And Jesus, aware of this, said to them, "Why are you discussing the fact that you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? Having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember? When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets full of broken pieces did you take up?" They said to him, 12. "And the 7 for the 4,000, how many baskets full of broken pieces did you take up?" And they said to him, 7. And he said to them, "Do you not yet understand?" I think I misquoted. I think I said 5 loaves in the last. It was 7 apparently, right? So anyways, so he uses this Isaiah-type language on the apostles to say, you're not seeing, you're not hearing, and your hearts are hardened. What's going on? You guys are not getting this. What's an example of their hearts being hardened and them not hearing in that text? What shows us that why he would even say that to them? Kathy.
So I have a reference to verse 15, being that this is in reference to influence.
The leaven? Yeah, the leaven.
Actually have 1 Corinthians 5, 6 through 8, where it talks about boasting. And I've made a note, when public sin is not addressed and dealt with, it will spread its destructive consequences.
Okay, so the leaven of the Pharisees that he warned them against is could be sinful, but it's also, we talked about last time, the teaching, their doctrines, and the way that they see things. And he's warning them, don't let that become who you are, right? And just like that sin, if it's not dealt with, it's infectious. It's a bad thing. It spreads, and it causes a lot of trouble if left unchecked. So that warning is a very stern warning, and it, just like leaven, like we talked about the last time, it goes into a loaf, a lump or whatever, and only takes a little bit, and it spreads through the whole thing. And now the whole thing is leavened. It's all messed up with that. Greg, go ahead.
I find it interesting to watch the scene unfold in that they had forgotten bread. They don't have physical bread around them.
One
he's
loaf, yeah.
right, one loaf, like one loaf. That's it. And he says, "Watch out for the leaven." And he's intending for them to watch out for, as you've talked about, the influence the Pharisees can have in a negative way. And they end up going right back to the physical. We don't have bread. We don't have enough bread. How are we going to make it?
Yeah.
So that you were asking, how do we see that they're not perceiving what he's trying to get them to understand? I mean, it is quite apparent that he's trying to get away from the physical, and they just can't make that switch in their minds.
Right. We're talking about spiritual problems, like Kathy brought up. The leaven can be sin that we don't want to let into our lives and things. We have to, think about the spiritual effect of those things, and that's what he's warning them: is think about the spiritual side of things. They didn't even go in a spiritual direction at all. They went completely physical and earthly. And it is one of those ironic things. He just fed 4,000, and of course they were with him when he fed the 5,000, and he multiplied the loaves that were too few and ended up with plenty. And now one loaf is a concern for them. That's just really odd. Clayton.
Well, they kind of seem it's like, they kind of get it, but not quite, because he says beware of the leaven, and it's like, and they're all, oh, we're out of bread. We don't really have any bread. So, they kind of get what he was talking about, but it's like not quite. It's like, close, but no. And but the ironic thing is that if you actually watch this scene, okay, the Pharisees are like, show us a sign. Okay, were you not paying attention? He just fed 4,000 men, not including the women and children, just the men, with I don't know about what, 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish.
7 this time.
Or 7. They weren't. I mean, were you guys even paying attention to what just happened?
Yeah.
He literally fed about, more than 1,000 people with just a couple of loaves of fish, and I guarantee you, because they were like, oh, they've been with us for 3 days. You guys give them something to eat. And it's like, all right, well, just and he does the whole, and it's like, give us a sign. Like, were you guys not paying attention? That's why he was all beware of the leaven, because it's like these guys are going to pull you down, because they don't seem to get it.
Yeah, one of the things that the leaven that he's talking about of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod is the complete misunderstanding of the Messiah. Even the Messiah, we talk about this a lot, where even the apostles have this struggle with the idea that he's going to be this physical king that's going to help the nation, rise up again, conquer its enemies. Its enemy being Rome. Its enemy being anybody who oppresses that nation, and they'll be great again. They'll be like David. They wanted someone to be like David, that conquering king. Jesus, through Mark, has been conquering like crazy. He's not conquering Rome. He's conquering Satan over and over and over again with all these demon possessions and everything, sickness. He's conquered every issue and every real problem people have, aside from the oppressors of Rome. Those that he's not concerned about that. And it's interesting that the Pharisees and Herod have something in common. They like power, they like authority, and even the idea of the Messiah being that kind of Messiah would appeal to them. And that is that's the leaven that he's saying, don't let that be a part of what you think. And now they don't see it yet. We are going to see how this develops. The last thing about this section here is he asked them, you're not seeing, you're not hearing, don't you remember? And then he asked them this question. When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets full of broken pieces did you take up? And they said to him, 12. And then the 7 for the 4,000, how many baskets did you take up? Those are the 2 things he asked them, which were kind of the same thing. And they said to him, 7. He said to them, do you not yet understand? What does he want them to see in their answer now? They get it as far as they did witness it. They aren't wrong about those numbers and what happened. What's that? He wants faith, right? What is he asking them to focus on from those particular instances? Okay, the quantity is one, right? It's interesting. How many? Gary, did you?
That's a big part of who he is, why he's doing that, and they have to understand sooner or later that he is the bread of life. He gives them everything. He's already calmed the sea. And they said, who is this that the wind and the sea obey him?
Yeah.
And they've seen him do all those miracles, like you said, the demons. And he's already taken care of bread twice.
He's got the bread covered. Yeah, and so what do you see in the fact that there's 12, the first instance, and 7? What are they that are full? Baskets. How many loaves fit in a basket? I mean, we don't know how big these baskets were. I know that the word for baskets in chapter 8 are large baskets, apparently. I've only heard that. This version doesn't say it. I think some versions say large baskets. Either way, I picture a loaf of bread, and I don't know how big this basket was, but I figure you can probably fit 5 loaves in a basket. And I don't know, 3 loaves? Anyways, what happened to that bread? What happened to the few loaves? Aaron?
Well, again, it's kind of what my dad was talking about. There's a contrast. It's the same thing that he said at the well. I can give you water where you'll never thirst again. He's the bread of life. He fed 5,000. I don't know how much time has passed, but people are hungry again. And he fed 4,000. And people are going to continue to be hungry. And they're going to continue to go, need bread, go without bread. That's not really the point. It's not really why Jesus is there. The Pharisees are asking for a sign. Show us a sign, show us a sign. It would have been really easy for Jesus to do that.
Yeah.
He could have said, okay, here you go. But that's not why he's there. And so he's come for a very specific purpose. And he wants them to start thinking about that purpose. And it's not to feed people.
Yeah, and then, we talked about Greg talked about in the parable of the sower, that idea of kind of a veiled message, still a little bit of a veiled message going on. He's referring to, like you say, he's the bread of life. He's not saying it plainly. He's saying this. He's using these pictures, these word pictures, these, physical pictures for them to see that he is able to provide an abundance of what you need, the food that you need. We know later that spiritual food is what people need, and that's his real mission. It really isn't to feed people, but he's using this as is it a metaphor to show that he's doing that. And look at all of the abundance left over to fill up baskets when you started with not enough, and how he does that same thing in us. We don't have enough. We're hungry. We're spiritually hungry. That's what the lesson should be, right? That's what he wants them to see. They're still just stuck in the physical. And again, we're gonna watch them develop. We know there's hope for these disciples, these apostles. we know the end of the story, having read it and talked about it several times, that there's hope for them, that they won't stay dull and lacking in their senses. They're going to get it, but this process that he's putting them through, there's a reason for it, and I think he's focusing on. haven't I like given you way more than is actually needed? I can provide. That's what it comes down to. And then the numbers are interesting. But Lito and then Greg.
The Pharisees didn't really have the spiritual understanding on the fact that everything that Christ has done, because of the fact that they're really seeking for a sign, which is in other accounts in Matthew, Jesus mentioned about the prophet Jonah as a sign in 3 days and 3 nights, but they didn't understand those kind of things. Instead, they didn't really recognize Christ as the Messiah, because they're looking for a king, a physical kingdom from the beginning. And that's what they still didn't, with those miracles that Christ has done, they still don't want to believe it because they're seeking for a spiritual, physical kingdom.
Right. Yeah, that preconceived idea is really a struggle for the Pharisees, and we're watching it happen with the disciples and apostles. Now, Greg.
So the numbers, I'll take a stab at it.
Yeah, numbers are interesting.
They are interesting.
Now, whether it's a big thing or not, we don't have to go.
I would agree.
Yeah.
The two things that jump into my mind, though.
Okay.
The number 12 would be the children of Israel.
Right.
And the tribes and the fulfillment of the promise to Israel. And when historically it's been a remnant that is left over, a very small amount, to your point, there's an abundance available for the 12. So I think there's something to be seen there. I don't know how deep that goes.
Okay.
But then follow that up with 7, which is typically used in the biblical narrative to symbolize completeness.
Okay.
And so he's, to your other point, he's overly and abundantly providing so that you will be completely fed, and there will be no question that when you come to him, you will be satisfied. So I think those two numbers become interesting. Ida has a thought on that, apparently.
Yeah, I want to hear it because it.
Well, no.
She doesn't like. Okay.
It wasn't going to be about the numbers.
Oh, okay. Well, do you want to hold on to that for just a second?
Sure.
Okay. Well, hold on to that. But just a fun thing about the numbers. Somebody said something in here one time when this was coming up. Pat Curro, is that what it was? The 7, the 12 is the 12 tribes, and it could be the 12 apostles. You know, all this is that imagery, the 12. When you say 12, everybody goes, huh? Okay, we know what that is. That's Israel. That's the thrones in heaven. It's a lot of things. So the 12, they mean that stuff. And we know we're talking spiritual things. But, and Mark is kind of like an Exodus of the New Testament in a way, too, with all this conquering of, the enemy and the promises and all that. So you get some of that imagery. But anyways, the 7, when they moved into the land, the promised land, they kicked out 7 nations. And I couldn't remember what Pat had said, and I had to look it up. And I found something that said that, and I went, there it is. And I just thought that's kind of cool. And especially now, we know they're in a Gentile area with these 4,000. So now what's Jesus saying? I've been able to do this for Israel first, and now I'm going to do it for everyone. I'm going to include everyone. So this blessing, this overabundance of the bread of life is for the whole. I want you to see that. And the Pharisees are like, they're not going to see that, right? They're going to be completely blind to that. The Israelites are going to struggle. The Jewish Christians later on are even going to struggle with that idea. But he's bringing it in a little bit with that. I thought that was cool. So anyways, well, how far to take it, I don't know. And how much that's completely the reason Jesus said it. But there is something about when he says 7 and 12, or 12 and 7, those aren't numbers that are odd. They're actually used several times. Ida, what do you got?
Okay. So we were talking about the perceptions of the disciples and how they just weren't getting it. And he warns them about the leaven of the Pharisees and Herod.
Okay.
And to me, whatever it is that the Pharisees are offering, what Herod is offering, is not fulfilling. It's not nutritious. It's not going to help them at all.
I like that.
It's not just that it's
Wrong, or yeah.
you know, it's that it's actually not helping them. And I think if we go to Isaiah 55, it talks about, why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? And when we learn about what the Pharisees taught and the lengths that they went to try to get their way, to try to conform God's law to what they wanted, we see how no one could be satisfied and no one could have could grow, but they needed to listen diligently to me and eat what is good and delight yourself in rich food. Incline your ear and come to me. Hear that your soul may live, and I will make with you an everlasting covenant. Anyways, it goes on,
That
and
fits
it's so
perfectly.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's what God wanted to give them, but they were all tied up in their own little teachings and their own little ambitions.
I really like that. That really brings it together, because here's Jesus giving nutrition, and they have, 0 calories. They're all sugar. They're, and the reality of the benefit, there's no benefit. It's selfishness is what she brought out. If you heard that they use that. How did you say it? They molded God around their desires, his ways or whatever, to fit what they wanted. I like that you said that, because that is, again, as we move on, we're going to see how our selfish motives, our selfish ambition, or whatever those selfish things that we have, how they are not going to fit in the kingdom. It just doesn't even work in the kingdom. So, good. I think it's a great place to hopefully not leave it behind, but carry it forward in these next, especially this next account here in verse 22, where it says, "And they came to Bethsaida, and some people brought to him a blind man, and begged him to touch him. And he took the blind man by the hand, and led him out of the village. And when he had spit on his eyes and laid his hands on him, he asked him, 'Do you see anything?' And he looked up and said, 'I see people, but they look like trees walking.' And Jesus laid his hands on his eyes again, and he opened his eyes. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. And he sent him to his home, saying, 'Do not even enter the village.'" Okay, what do you see there that's unique about this miracle that's done? Gary? We've never seen that before, right? We've never seen that before. He must have been really blind.
To see things. So I guess this is a parallel, could be a parallel with that.
There you
for
go.
Sure.
Yeah, I do think that there's hope for those disciples, isn't there? Again, we know that. We know that they are, at this point, would you say the disciples are seeing clearly? No, they're not seeing clearly. Would you say maybe they're seeing like men like trees walking? Likely, kind of like that, right? It's like they see Jesus. They're with him. We're about to watch an account here soon where they say something just right, but still don't clearly see. This message is going to, that's what's developing here. He's bringing that out as he goes. Could he have healed this guy in one touch or without even touching him? Yeah, we all agree. He's healed in many ways. I heard somebody say, he could just say, be healed, and the whole world would be healed. If he wanted to, he could do that. There's purpose behind everything he's doing. So this is a message. This is a sign. And we talked about that. All of the miracles have a sign behind them that have a message of who he is, what he wants to bring, what he's trying to accomplish, and our place in all of that. So you look like you want to say something, Greg.
Yeah, I think it's just a reminder that as people are coming to understand the gospel message, that there's going to be stages of them understanding what's being revealed to them. I mean, you don't look at the Bible the first time and clearly understand everything.
Yeah.
You start to see it, and it starts to build inside of you, and you're changed to understand more and more of it the more you study. And I think that's the same thing we're seeing with this man. That as he's saying, I'm bringing about this sight that I promised back in Isaiah, obviously the same language of Isaiah 6, and there's going to be some growth that's needed, obviously, as we've said, for even the disciples. So
Right, disciples. And we can apply that, like you said, to even anyone in their walk with Christ and in the Scriptures is going to start with some vision, but they're going to need to keep going to get a more clear vision of everything. And that doesn't come immediately. It's a process. I think a process is a good way to word that. Does anybody see anything else in there that's interesting or something else you saw that you'd like to talk about in that section? Aaron?
He also takes him out of the town.
Okay.
He doesn't heal him right there. He walks him out of the town.
All right. So, we can speculate, I guess, about that too. It seems like that's what we want to do tonight. Just to
Speculate. No, we don't want to speculate too much. Well, you don't have anything for that? Because I don't have much. I looked at that and I thought it was interesting. And I did say, wow, that's something. I don't know if there's I don't know what lesson we can get out of that particular part. I would say there is one. God doesn't waste ink, as I've heard that said before, and I think that's true. Lito, do you have an answer for that question?
From verse 5, where it says that the eyes of the blind will be opened and the ears of the deaf will be unstopped. This is like an example of the fulfillment of what has been prophesied, as Greg had mentioned. And Isaiah, that all these prophecies will be fulfilled at the time of Christ. All those blind will see, all those deaf will hear about the word and the good news about the Messiah or something like that.
Which you reminded me of something that I kind of wanted to say. So what is, and you didn't answer that question, by the way, and that's okay, about why you took him out. I don't know. But what is the mission here of Jesus? If we maybe just look at this last section. What's the mission? What's he trying to accomplish with really everyone? What is he trying to do? I get the bread of life. We've talked about that. It's good. There's something right there. And Isaiah has been saying it over and over again. Okay? He wants to show that he's the Son of God. And he wants us to see that he's the Son of God. So what's he trying to do? He's trying to open our eyes. He's trying to open the eyes of the blind. He doesn't want anybody blinded. He doesn't you know, and I did like, and I probably can't even put it together very well in words, so I got to be careful. But in that, why does he speak in parables? Because, you know, it's given to those who seek. Those who seek end up finding the answer. Like when they asked Jesus in the house later on, or in the, you know, away from the crowd, when they said, we don't quite understand this parable, can you explain it to us? He said, well, then how are you going to understand all the parables? You need to look for that spiritual message. You need to open your eyes. He's trying to open our eyes, but we have a part in that we, you know, go to him because he's the one who can do it, right? Have mercy on me, or bring someone to him just like they did, so that he can open their eyes. This opening the eyes of the blind and the ears of the deaf, that's pretty neat when you think about it. That's really his mission. He wants to open the eyes of the Pharisees, but they're blinding their own eyes and closing their own ears. Yes, Miss Diane.
So I'm trying to understand. He came into Bethsaida, and they brought a blind man. So the people did?
I'm thinking friends of the blind man, someone. I don't know if it means the disciples or,
But then
but
he took the blind man out of town. So was the miracle for the disciples only and their eyes only? Because he did mention, why did he then mention, don't tell him?
yeah, so
He's done that before.
you do picture the disciples going with him, I would think. They tend to stick with Jesus, and they travel in a group. So it seems like it would be for them. So yeah, maybe that would be it, that he's not trying to do a miracle that will attract people for the sake of miracles, for the show of the miracle, get them out of that. See, she's answering Aaron's question. That's pretty good. Because you basically said it. But that makes sense. And then now they're able to see this two-step process. He just got done dealing with them alone. And so getting him out of the crowd might make sense because it's really focused on the disciples and the apostles at this moment.
Might even be able to go one step further than that and
Okay.
say that he's turning his back on the city. In Luke 10, verse 13, he says, "Woe to you, Bethsaida! If the signs that had been done in Sodom and Gomorrah, or Tyre and Sidon,
Yeah, that's what.
that would have been done in your town, you wouldn't have believed.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have even understood then. If I had done even greater things than I did in your sight, you wouldn't have understood." So
Yeah.
maybe Mark not focusing as much as that on that narrative, more on the Isaiah fulfillment, isn't putting it as a major mark in the narrative. But I think that town is certainly not receptive as much as
Okay.
he would like them to be. So I think
That
we might be
fits.
seeing that happen.
I think that fits. Aaron, you like that one? Okay, he liked that one. So. That's not too much speculation, is it? Is it okay? I hope not. It does seem to work. That makes good sense. That he left for a reason. All right. Let's read on. Let's go to Mark chapter 8 and verse 27. And Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they told him, "John the Baptist, and others say Elijah, and others one of the prophets." And he asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter answered him, "You are the Christ." And he strictly charged them to tell no one about him. Okay, well, we'll just work with that section, I think, right now. So, this scene here, what do you see, I guess, that jumps out to you in that section? I'll try not to lead it too much.
Those words get me excited. He says, "You are the Christ."
Right, so there we are with Peter saying, "You are the Christ." And yeah, everybody goes, "All right, finally, they're getting it," right? So yeah, that's the words that he wants to hear. And you know, if we were just a cheering section alongside, we'd be saying, "That's it, man. Peter's got it." let's read on. Oh, go ahead, Greg.
I just find it interesting that they know their scriptures enough to know who John the Baptist is, and they know their scriptures enough to know who Elijah is and the prophets are, and they just equate him to something else that's talking about the Messiah to come. Right? He's not the fulfillment, he's just another like them. That John the Baptist was paving the way for the Messiah, so is this guy.
Okay, so you have the people.
The people are saying, I mean, they're recognizing that there's something to him.
Right.
They're giving some value to him. Oh, he's John the Baptist, he's Elijah, he's a prophet. All things that they would have been comfortable assigning, but they couldn't quite make the connection to the Messiah, even though they knew enough of their scriptures to make the other connections.
Yeah. Yeah, if we had to equate them to the blind man in the last story, maybe they're the blind man just arriving at the scene and still not being able to really see. I don't know. That's a stretch. But now Peter, we see him at least seeing trees walking. At least there's trees walking. You might say he's seeing clearly because it says you are the Christ. You know, is it in John or one of the other versions? He says, you know, that God told you that. This isn't from you. This isn't from man. This is from God. You've learned this from God. So it's the right thing to say, but did Peter really understand? Kathy?
I don't believe Peter knew what was destined for Christ when he realized that he was
We know he didn't really understand at this point. He's right that he is the Christ, but what does that even mean? And I think that's the part that they still don't see. What is he here for? All of that. Yeah, let's look at. We'll read ahead. I'm sure we'll probably not be able to move on from this section, but I think it does justice to read ahead a little bit. Verse 31. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and the scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And he said this plainly. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and seeing his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, Get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. So there we see that Peter, in his great confession that Jesus is the Christ, in the next breath, what did Peter do wrong there? He's rebuking Jesus. That's a good start right there. I would say that may not be a wise choice. Rebuking the God of heaven. Yeah, what is he, okay, what is his misconception there? What is that? Is it really? It's not me. Yeah.
Any part of what he was saying wasn't going to come true.
It doesn't.
It's like that's not the point.
It doesn't make sense, Jesus. Why would you come here to become the Messiah? I just said you're the Messiah. That means you're our king. That means you're our conqueror. That means you're our leader. And you're the great one that's going to rise up and deliver Israel. You can't die. I'm going to pull you aside and let you know you're wrong in this one. It's really something, really. So, but yeah, excellent point. Ida. Okay, Clayton.
Yeah, but see, okay, he gets that he's the Son of God, but he was like, oh yeah, you're the Messiah, you're the one we wait for to rise up and get rid of the Romans. But he didn't get that's not what he was there for.
Yeah.
If he was there for that, he would have done it already.
Right. And, and really, I do feel like there's a chance here that I might have lost my train of thought. I watched him unplug that speaker, and I thought, what is he doing? Yeah, well, I had a thought when you said that, but maybe it'll come back. Ida?
So isn't it cool book that's about the evangelion, the gospel of the conquering king, that one of the characters in the book that you've seen says, you're going to be the conquering king. What do you mean you're going to die? But the whole book is about the conquering king. So it's just kind of paradoxical.
What's the word you used?
Oh, evangelion.
What is that? Oh, okay. Is that...
Of the it's that when the heralds they didn't win, they just went back and fought again. And that message, that good news went out that the king conquered.
That the king is the conqueror.
Telling us about, and that's what it says at the beginning of the book.
Right. Okay. That's the gospel, the good news. We have a conqueror. We have a good king. A good conquering king. A good, powerful king.
Yeah, but here one of his subjects, one of his cabinet, says, oh, no, you're not going to die. You're not.
Yeah. Yeah, see, well, and it makes sense from that physical view. That it would not make sense that, what do you mean you're going to die? I won't let that happen. I'm going to stand next to you and fight for you, We know that from some other instances as well. So that's a good place to stop, I think. I don't know I think our timing is right? Yeah. We will come back to that, but I really like the flow of that. And from here on, another thing I hadn't said yet, this is kind of one of those major divisions where Jesus starts to speak plainly, and he starts unveiling who he is more clearly to the disciples as he's going through, at least through chapter 10, and that's that kind of section. So we're going to see a lot of this kind of language where he's telling them, I'm going to tell you what's going on, and I need you to listen. And they're going to struggle with it, We know that on the other side of the resurrection, they see clearly. I think God helps them with that very much. So, all right. Well, thank you for that time. That was wonderful.